So, good morning, and really nice to see all of you here. Thank you for coming. This topic we're looking at this weekend is one of my favorite topics, although it's kind of an unpleasant one, but it's really important that we look at it and learn how to manage anger wisely. Otherwise, it's the cause of so much suffering for ourselves and others and the world, as we know well. So yeah, thank you for being here and making it possible for us to have this retreat. So we'll begin with some prayers, which we should be up on the screen, no? Okay. And while doing the prayers, if you want, if you can visualize the Buddha in the space in front of you, made of light, radiating light and all these positive qualities that the Buddha has, like universal compassion, love for all living beings throughout space, and incredible wisdom that understands things clearly, correctly as they are, which dispels darkness, confusion, suffering, and so on. So try to feel Buddha is someone we can rely on to help us, to guide us, like a guiding light in our life and all the kind of confusion and chaos in the world. And then you can think that this figure of the Buddha in front of you represents all the objects of refuge that we are taking refuge in for the benefit of ourselves and of all other beings.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha
So do your best to have an altruistic motivation as your reason for being here. So you probably generated such a motivation earlier today during the meditation practice. So you can renew that, refresh that now. And if that's difficult to do, then you can just try to have this thought, this attitude, wishing that what we're doing here right now in this session, but also in this retreat this weekend, may it be beneficial to myself and to all other beings. Okay, so this is a big topic that we're looking at this weekend, and we have a relatively short amount of time, only 1.5 days, so we won't be able to cover every aspect of it, but I'll do my best to cover certain points. And I've made some slides which you can get a copy of afterwards. So you don't need to worry about frantically writing down every word on the slide, but I think it just helps to have some words up there while I'm talking to help you focus on what we're talking about. And so we decided to call this course Cooling the Flames of Anger. And there are some references in Buddhist scriptures that compare anger to fire. And this is one example. This is a verse from the first Dalai Lama. It's actually from a prayer that he composed to Tara, the female figure of enlightenment. So it says, driven by the wind of inappropriate attention, billowing, swirling smoke clouds of misconduct, it has the power to burn down forests of goodness. The fire of anger, please protect us from this danger. So it said that Tara, one of the functions of Tara, one of her activities is protecting us from different kinds of dangers. And there's a list of 8 dangers, including fire and also snakes and lions and floods, things that can endanger our life. But each of these external dangers has an internal aspect, one of the afflictions in our mind. So for fire, which is very much a danger, just last year we had to evacuate for a week because of a big fire burning in the area. And we know well all the terrible damage, destruction, and death that can be caused by fire. And then the internal equivalent of that is anger, the state of mind of anger. So yeah, it said that Tara can protect us from these different dangers, and the first Dalai Lama composed this prayer, which is in our red prayer book. If you're really interested, we can show it to you later, asking Tara to help us be saved, be protected from this danger. And I think, saying that anger is like fire also exists in our culture. There's this expression, getting hot under the collar. Yeah. Doesn't that talking about anger? Somebody getting angry. Hot-headed. And I seem to recall cartoons where there's a person getting angry and they have fire coming out of their ears and their yeah. So yeah, it can be similar to fire also in its destructive nature. Anger can be very destructive. But also in Buddhist scriptures, fire is also associated with wisdom. In some scriptures, they talk about the fire of wisdom. Wisdom, especially the wisdom that understands the true nature of things, emptiness, ultimate truth. That kind of wisdom is like a fire in that it burns up our afflictions, like anger, and especially ignorance that doesn't see things correctly. So it kind of burns up our afflictions and our obscurations, our confusion, our suffering. So fire isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing as well if we cultivate this wisdom. Okay, so the next slide just gives a list of some of the things I will try to cover this weekend. First, we'll look at, what Buddhism says about anger, how it's explained in the Buddhist teachings. Then we'll look at disadvantages of anger, because in Buddhism, the ideal is to see that anger is something harmful, something that causes suffering for ourselves and others, so that we have the energy to work on overcoming it, reducing it as much as we can, managing it skillfully, and eventually being free of it altogether. But to get that kind of energy, that kind of motivation to work on anger, we need to recognize the faults, the problems that come from anger. And then we'll look at some strategies for managing anger, different kinds of tools, antidotes, methods we can use. There's actually lots of those. We can't cover all of them in this weekend, but at least we can start. And there's books. There's some really good books, including Venerable Children's book, Working with Anger, which is available here, I think, in our little book nook downstairs. So if you're interested, there are more resources you can use. And then hopefully, just at least before the end, we'll look at some positive aspects of the mind, loving kindness and compassion, which are themselves antidotes to anger. So the more we can cultivate those qualities in our mind, then the less anger we'll have, and the more skills we'll have for overcoming anger. Okay, so we'll first look at what Buddhism says about anger. And this may differ from how anger is explained in other religions or other traditions, different branches of psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, and so on. So you may have learned about anger, from other sources. And what is said here may differ, but that's something we can discuss, and there will be an opportunity in the afternoon for discussion, so you can share your own thoughts and ideas and what you've learned and so on. So first of all, anger is a mental factor. Okay, so let's just pause there. So Buddhism has a whole body of information about the mind, what the mind is. And in case any of you are not familiar with that, I'll just briefly explain it. So according to Buddhism, our mind, each of us has a mind, and our mind is not any part of our body, nothing physical. It's not our brain, and it's not even the kind of electrical impulses produced by the brain. The mind is something completely non-physical, non-material. So it's not made of cells, molecules, atoms, and so on, these kind of material particles you can put under a microscope and look at and observe and study and so on. Mind has no physical properties at all. So it can't be seen with our eyes, can't be touched with our fingers or instruments. So it's totally non-physical, which makes it a little mysterious, a little hard to, understand and work with. And in fact, the only tool that can be used to study the mind is the mind itself. And so that's, a big part of Buddhism is using the mind to observe the mind, study the mind, work with the mind. There's no other means of doing that other than using the mind itself. So it's non-physical. That's one characteristic of the mind. And the other main characteristic of the mind is that it knows, it experiences. It's that part of us that is aware, that has awareness, consciousness. Okay, so even like right now at this moment, our mind is operating. It's aware of different things. If you have your eyes open, you're aware of all the visual objects in the room, other people, the lights, the walls, and so on. So it's your mind that is having that experience of seeing. And sounds, the sound of my voice, other sounds that may be going on. So that experience of hearing sounds is also the mind. So all of our senses, our five senses, when they're experiencing things, it's actually our mind that is experiencing, not our eyes, not our brain, but our mind. And another important way the mind experiences things is with just what's called mental consciousness. And that includes all of our thoughts, our memories, our emotions, our dreams when we are sleeping at night. And so that part of our mind is active quite a lot. We think a lot, we process what we take in with our senses, we react to it emotionally, and so on and so forth. So all those different kinds of experience are included in the mind. Mind is something very complex. It's like the term mind is kind of an umbrella term that covers all of our conscious experiences, all of our awarenesses and perceptions and thoughts and emotions and so on. And in the Buddhist science of mind, we study different types of mind. There's different ways of dividing up mind. And within that is one type of mind called mental factors. So mental factors are aspects of our mind, and there's a variety of different mental factors. For example, feeling. Feeling is one mental factor, and that's just, as soon as we see something or hear something or think of something, there's immediately a feeling there, either a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling or a neutral kind of indifferent feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So that's something going on constantly. We're feeling pleasant or unpleasant or neutral about everything we perceive, everything we think of. And then all the different emotions that we have, what we call emotions in the West, these are also mental factors. So that's where anger fits in. Anger is a mental factor. And mental factors are not always there in our mind. Some of them are there every moment, but not all of them. And anger is one that isn't always present. Whew, good news. So, and the same is true for other emotions, even love, compassion. In our minds, ordinary beings' minds, these are things that come and go, rather than being permanently always there every single instant. So that's just to give you some idea of how anger is understood in Buddhism. It's an aspect of the mind, a factor of the mind, something that is transitory, is sometimes there and sometimes not. Then it goes on to say, it's unable to bear a person, object, situation, or idea. It harbors ill will or wishes to harm. So anger always has an object. There's always an object that is being referred to, being observed. And it could be a person. Probably most of the time when we're angry, it's at another person, another human being. But it could also be another kind of being, like a mosquito, right? If there's a mosquito buzzing around trying to get you, then anger can arise towards that, or animals and so on. It's also possible to get angry at inanimate objects, like your car when it's not cooperating with you, or a rock. If you stub your toe on a rock, you might be angry at the rock. Have you ever done that? Or a thorn bush. If you walk past a thorn bush and your nice jacket gets ripped, you might be angry at the thorn bush. Or sounds, a sound that we may find annoying, irritating. That's something, one of my big problems. And then situations. So, for example, traffic jam. That's more of a situation. You can't really find one person you can blame, but it's just a situation that we may find ourselves in. But it's interesting. We can get angry about a traffic jam that we are stuck in, but do we ever get angry at a traffic jam that we're not stuck in? When you're driving down the freeway and there's a traffic jam on the other side of the road. Not this side of the road, but that side. You get angry about that one? So, So that's interesting. We'll talk more about that later. What are the different factors, causes, and conditions that anger comes up in our mind? Ideas, it's also possible, that's something more abstract, but we could get angry about an idea. For example, the idea that certain people might, win the election and take control of the country and implement laws that they want, but not that we want. So that idea could stir up anger in us. Yeah, so there's different things that we can get angry at or angry about. And when anger is there in the mind, then it finds this person or object or situation unbearable. It's like, I can't stand that. I can't bear that. And it may feel ill will. Ill will is, also called malice. It's kind of wanting to do something, wanting to give harm, or at least to stop this situation that we can't bear. And sometimes it's strong enough that we act on it. We actually do something physical, punching somebody in the nose or swatting that mosquito. I read this story of a guy, I think he was in Colorado. He got angry at his computer, his laptop computer, and he took it out in the backyard and fired his gun at it. Yeah, a very useful thing to do. But yeah, it's kind of causes us to be irrational, do irrational things. And yeah, but even if we don't act it out, even if it just goes round and round in our mind, it disturbs our mind. It does cause chaos, disturbance, suffering in our mind and also in our lives. Yeah, so understanding that anger is a mental factor, it's just something in our mind, and it's something impermanent, something that comes and goes rather than something always there permanently. This is really helpful. I mean, for myself personally, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, it's really helpful. Because otherwise, what can sometimes happen is when anger comes up in our mind, we tend to identify with it. Yeah? And we even say, I am angry, right? As if I and anger are one and the same. And that's not true. Anger is just something that arises in our mind, comes into our mind, and we'll look later at how and why, what are the causes and conditions that bring anger up in our mind. But yeah, when we identify with the anger, then that can lead to feelings of guilt, feeling, oh, I'm a bad person because I'm angry. And even self-hatred, self-loathing, beating ourselves up because of anger in our mind. And those attitudes aren't healthy. That's like turning anger against ourselves. Yeah, using anger to beat ourselves up, to be angry at ourselves. It's not helpful, for one thing. It doesn't do any good, doesn't help. And it just causes suffering. Yeah? And it's not realistic. It's not correct to think that way. And we are not anger. Anger is not one with us. We are not one and the same with our anger. It's, I think, better to think of anger like a disease, like a virus, like COVID, right? And this is good both when it comes to the way we feel about ourselves, but also the way we feel about others. Because the same thing can happen with others. If there's a person who gets angry a lot, then we may kind of identify that person as being angry, as if they were always permanently angry. That is their nature. And then we have negative feelings towards them. We judgmental, critical, angry at that person who's angry. And so that's not healthy to think that way. So it's more skillful, more healthy to think of anger as just something that comes and goes in our mind. It's an aspect of the mind, not a physical thing, and it comes and goes. And like a disease, it causes suffering. Okay, just like when somebody gets COVID, right? The virus COVID has somehow gotten into their body and is affecting their organs in their body, and so they're not feeling well. But we don't think, oh, that person has COVID, ooh, they're bad, as if that's something permanent. They're always like that, always will be like that, and they're somehow bad and we should have aversion for them. I don't think we ever react that way. Instead, we feel compassion. We understand that, oh, that's like a sickness and they're suffering and I want to help them. We can still protect ourselves, but our attitude is compassion and wanting to help them, wanting to get them to the doctor and get the medicine to free them from this sickness. So if we can try to have that same kind of attitude with anger, whether it's in ourselves or in somebody else, that's a healthier way of viewing that it's like a disease, like a virus, temporary, not permanent, not who the person really is all the time, forever, permanently, but just something that temporarily is infecting their mind, their being. So we can have that view about ourselves and about others. It's more helpful. And, just as with diseases, there are medicines that can cure. So there's also medicines or methods that we can use to cure ourselves of anger. Then the second point here is it is based on inappropriate attention that exaggerates or projects unattractive qualities. Okay, so the way that anger occurs or arises in our mind is first we perceive an object. It could be something we perceive with our senses or something we think of. We just think of a particular person or remember some incident that happened. And with that perception or that, mental experience, there will probably be an unpleasant feeling. Yeah, kind of a feeling of, not a pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. Then what happens next is the mind gets caught up in this. This is another mental factor called inappropriate attention. And what inappropriate attention does, it's not, I don't think we do this deliberately, consciously, but it's just the function of that particular mental factor. It starts thinking about that object and thinking in a negative way. Oh, how bad it is, how it hurts me, it makes me suffer, it's the cause of my problems, causing other problems for other people as well. So it starts to kind of spin all these stories, and it can even write a whole novel, a whole, movie script or play about this object. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah? It just gets all caught up in these thoughts, imagined motives behind the person's actions. And most of this probably is just invented by our mind. We don't really know. We can't see into other people's minds. We can't see what's really going on in their minds, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's behind their actions. But we imagine, okay? We guess. And we tend to believe our suppositions. We tend to believe that this is true, this is reality. And so there's often exaggeration, as it says here. It kind of exaggerates certain qualities, certain aspects of the person. I mean, there may be some bad qualities there, but we tend to build them up, expand them, make them worse than they really are, and also project. There's often projection of things onto the person that we don't really know if that's true or not, but our mind projects. And some Buddhist texts actually say that this is kind of like analytical meditation, but a negative form of analytical meditation. So here we try to, in our tradition, we use analytical meditation to contemplate the teachings of the Buddha, topics like the precious human life and karma and so on, and to understand them better and bring about a positive transformation of our mind through this understanding. So it's something constructive, it's beneficial. But they say we already know how to do analytical meditation. Our mind does it anyway. This mental factor, inappropriate attention. When we have anger at somebody, we do analytical meditation, how bad they are, how horrible they are. And likewise, when we have attachment, desire, craving, grasping, we do analytical meditation, kind of exaggerating all the good qualities of this object and how wonderful it is and how it will make me happy if only I could have it, if only I could be close to that person, and so on. So it's like analytical meditation, but in a way that increases afflictions, increases delusions, rather than overcomes them. And the Dalai Lama tells a story of meeting an American psychologist named Aaron Beck, who apparently spent a lot of time doing research into anger and hatred. And I think he's in his 90s already when the Dalai Lama met him, so many years of work. And so they had a conversation, and in the conversation, this psychologist, Aaron Beck, said, when we're angry at someone or we hate someone, we see that person as 100% bad. 90% of that is our own projection. And the Dalai Lama, he said he was really delighted when he heard that, because he said, oh, this is what we say in Buddhism too. Something about Nagarjuna, I guess in one of Nagarjuna's texts, he said something similar. But yeah, it was sort of like a contemporary confirmation of something that's existed in Buddhism for a long time, that, yeah, we project a lot onto the objects, the people that we have anger towards. So this is something to look at in our own experience. When we are angry, when we have anger or hatred towards another person, to just take a step back from what our mind is saying, and look at what our mind is saying about that person and ask ourselves, is this really true? Or at least, do I know? Can I know for sure what I think about that person is true? Yeah, so doing a reality check is very helpful. Then the third point here says it includes irritation, aversion, annoyance, impatience, spite, belligerence, resentment, hatred, and rage. So these are some variations of anger. And I think it's useful to know that these other states of mind, these other kinds of emotions, are types of anger. Because we probably have at least some of them, at least some of the time. And if we don't recognize these as variations of anger, then we might think, I'm not an angry person. I don't have a problem with anger. That actually happened. I was teaching a course once, and I spent quite a bit of time talking about anger. And after a couple of days, this one woman came to see me, and she wanted to talk privately. And she said that, when she first heard me talking about anger, she thought, I don't need to listen to this. I don't have a problem with anger. Yeah. But then, and then after, I guess, more reflection, then she realized, oh, she did have anger, but she was calling it something else. She was calling it being upset. And she said, yeah, I get upset with my mom and I get upset with my sister, but she didn't identify that as anger. Yeah. And I had a kind of similar experience myself when I first started learning Buddhism, and I heard all this about anger, and I thought, oh, I don't have that problem, because I associated anger with yelling and screaming and acting violently, because I saw some of that in my family growing up, and I just felt so repelled by that kind of behavior. And I said, oh, I don't want to be like that. I'm never going to be like that. And so I wouldn't, I didn't yell and scream and express my anger in those ways. And so I guess I got to think that, oh, I'm not an angry person. I don't have a problem with anger. But then looking more carefully, getting to know my mind better through meditation, I realized, woo, there's a lot of anger there. It's just not coming out. It's more like repressed. So yeah, so in case anyone has that notion that, oh, I don't have a problem with anger, that's not something I need to deal with. Other people do, but not me. Then check again. Yeah. And I think, yeah, even the feeling of dislike, when we have a feeling of dislike, yeah, it's kind of a low level form of anger. I think it is a form of anger. And even though it may not lead to anything harmful, any kind of destructive behavior, if we're not careful, if we don't work on it, it could build up. You know, as time goes on, it could grow and eventually turn into stronger anger. Yeah, so there's different forms of anger, different degrees, and maybe dislike, irritation, annoyance, that's kind of low level, not too harmful, not too destructive. But then, you know, there's stronger forms of anger like belligerence, hatred, rage, violence. Yeah. Then the last bullet point says, it is one of the main causes of suffering for oneself and others in this life and in future lives. So the Buddha wasn't always Buddha, wasn't always enlightened. He was once an ordinary person like us. And he must have experienced all the different kinds of emotions that there are, including anger and desire and jealousy. And so he knew those experiences. And he became aware of suffering in the world and in himself. He saw that people are suffering. There's a lot of suffering in the world. And he felt strongly motivated to find a way to end suffering, to bring all this suffering to an end. And that's what motivated him to set out on his spiritual journey, which eventually led him to attain what we call enlightenment or awakening. And one of the things he realized in this journey was that the root cause, the main cause of all suffering in the world are these, what we call afflictions or delusions, these mental factors that lie within our mind. And they disturb our mind. They also incite us to do things that are harmful to ourselves, to others, to the world. So with anger, I think anger is the clearest example of that, because if we look at all the awful things going on in the world, Israel just sent more missiles to Iran last night. It's like, you know, all the wars, the fighting, the conflicts, terrorist attacks. So the large-scale problems like that, as well as the more small-scale problems, domestic violence, violence between people, gang violence, and so on. Those are just some of the examples of what anger can do, right? If we look at why do these things happen, there are various factors, but a big part of it is anger, hatred. So it lies behind these terrible things happening in the world that cause so much suffering to so many people. And yeah, so I think, yeah, anger is a clear example of how the cause of suffering can be traced to afflictions in the mind. And there's many afflictions, but three main ones the Buddha pointed out, which are also called three poisons or three mental toxins, are anger or hatred, greed or attachment, desire, and ignorance. Ignorance meaning not understanding how things exist, being in the dark, being confused, seeing things incorrectly, unrealistically. So he said those are the three main roots, causes of all the suffering in the world. So that's the view in Buddhism, that anger is one of these things that leads to suffering, causes suffering. And so the goal in Buddhism is to not give anger free rein and let it control us, but rather learn to manage it. And eventually it is possible to overcome it completely. Buddhism says anger and the other afflictions are not permanent aspects of our mind that will be there forever and ever and ever. That may be one difference between the Buddhist view and psychology. I haven't studied psychology, but what I've heard is there's this notion that our brain is like hardwired to have emotions like anger, and we can learn to manage it, but we can never really get rid of it. It's always going to be there. So Buddha's experience was different. He was able to eliminate anger from his mind, and many others who have followed this path, who have, listened to Buddha's advice and practiced it, were able to have that same experience. And so they can confirm it is possible to free the mind from anger such that it never arises again. I mean, it's not easy to do. It's not something easy, instant, but it is possible. That's the Buddhist view, is to eventually eliminate it altogether. And when we first encounter that idea, we might feel some doubt, maybe some resistance. Yeah, for example, we may think, is it really that bad that I have to get rid of it? Can I just learn to live with it? Is it even possible to do that? Yeah. And what would it be like? How would it be if I didn't have anger in my mind? Don't I need it, like, to protect myself from people who want to hurt me? So we may have doubts about that. That's good it's fine to have doubts. The Buddha always said that we shouldn't blindly believe his teachings, but we should investigate them for ourselves, check to see if they're true or not. And so it's fine to doubt and question and explore and investigate. But to to sort of give more material or evidence as to why Buddhism thinks it's better to be free of anger, let's look at the disadvantages of anger. So the Buddhist scriptures have a lot of information, like lists of problems that come from anger, and it's helpful to look at these. It's a bit like, let's say, a patient who smokes, and they have a habit of smoking, and they go to see their doctor. They're coughing, and the doctor would like this patient to stop smoking, and so they might point out a lot of disadvantages of smoking. It does this, it does that, and da 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 da. And hopefully, the person will be convinced that, yeah, okay, maybe it's better I give this up. So yeah, if we can see in our experience and in the experience of others and the experience of the world that anger leads to problems, then we'll have more enthusiasm, more incentive to work on them. Okay, so first, it harms us, both mentally and physically. So this is something we need to check. We need to investigate in our experience. So we can look at our mind, our state of mind when there's anger, and what is that like? How does that feel? Yeah. Do you feel good? Do you feel happy? Do you feel calm and peaceful, pleasant? or not? Yeah. Do you feel unpeaceful, agitated, uneasy, restless? That's how I feel when I'm angry. It's hard to sit still even. There's this kind of restless energy. And then when you're trying to do something else, like if you have something you have to focus on, your work, or you're trying to read a book, or you're trying to study, or you're trying to meditate. So you're trying to focus your attention on something, but there are these angry thoughts going on. So how does that affect your ability to focus? Are you able to focus and do what you're trying to do, accomplish what you're trying to do? Or do you keep getting distracted by these angry thoughts? And are you able to enjoy things? Yeah, do you sort of feel relaxed and open and yeah, whatever you're doing, being with people, listening to music, eating, trying to fall asleep. Okay, are you able to enjoy those things, experience those things? So just checking how it affects your mind and your experiences with people, with other things you may be trying to do. Does it enhance your experiences, or does it affect them adversely? For example, sleep. Yeah, you ever tried to go to sleep when you're angry? Is it easy to go to sleep when you're angry? Yeah, you can lie away all night, tossing and turning with these angry thoughts going through your mind. And even if you do fall asleep, the kind of dreams you have may not be very pleasant ones. And then with our physical body, just check how you feel in your body. Do you feel kind of relaxed or tight, tense? And I've heard, I haven't really done a lot of research into this, but I've heard that, yeah, some research has been done into the effects of anger on our body, and they find that it's harmful for our health. It can lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer. It can shorten one's life. Yeah. So there's evidence from science, from medicine, of the harmful effects of anger. So just looking at how it affects us in the immediate sense, here and now, that can help us recognize that it's not helpful, it's harmful. Then secondly, it often incites us to harm others. So I already talked about things like war. Those are large-scale types of harm. But just, again, in our own life, in our own experience, we've probably all had experiences where we got angry at someone, including our, family, friends, people we have close relationships with, and then talked to them, spoke to them in an angry way, or even acted in angry ways towards them. And so probably looking back on those incidents, we don't feel good, we don't feel happy, we don't feel proud of ourselves. We probably feel a lot of regret, even if at the moment it seemed like the right thing to do. But later on, yeah, I don't think we really feel good about acting out anger in harmful ways. So it can, yeah, especially if it's chronic, it can destroy relationships. Yeah, we probably all had friendships with people that ended in anger, and then it's like you don't communicate with each other anymore. Even if you think of that person, your mind still gets tight, unhappy, angry. So yeah, it can cause us to lose friends or damage relationships like with our family. You can't really give up family members. Disown, I guess people try to do that, but you know, you can't really disown people in a way. But those relationships can be damaged such that you never talk to each other, never see each other. You don't want to have anything to do with each other. There's lots of incidents like that, which is very tragic, very sad. You know, it's not a happy situation. The one that causes continuous unhappiness and suffering. And it's even possible to lose your home, to get kicked out of, I guess if you're renting a place, not if you own it, but if you're renting an apartment or a house and you're angry and you're maybe, you know, damaging the property, then you might get kicked out. That happened to someone I know. And jobs. People probably lose jobs because of anger. If they get angry a lot at work, then they may get fired. And people also end up in prison as a result of anger. So many crimes are committed out of anger. And that can lead to life in prison or even a death sentence if you're in one of those states that still has capital punishment. So those are like the worst case scenarios, but they do happen. Every day people commit crimes out of anger, out of hatred. And that just destroys their life and destroys the lives of their loved ones as well, their families, friends. So those are things that we can observe in our own experience, and also looking at the world around us, the experiences of others. We can see those results of anger. The next one is a hidden effect of anger, not something that we can see. But this is what it says in the Buddha's scriptures, that it destroys our merit, which is the cause of happiness. So we use the word merit for, when we do good things, virtuous things, good karma, we create good karma from being generous, living ethically, helping others, practicing meditation, and so on. So when we do good deeds, virtuous deeds, we create merit, also known as positive potential. It's the cause of happiness. And leaves imprints in our mind that in the future will ripen as good experiences in this life, in future lives. So merit is the cause of happiness. And it's said that getting angry, depending on who you get angry at and how you get angry and so on, that can destroy a lot of the merit that we have created. So that's really bad. That's a bit like throwing your hard-earned money into a fire. Okay, you work all month, maybe you get cash or you get a check, and then you throw it in a fire. Now, who would do that? You'd have to be crazy to do that, right? So, we work hard to create merit, to create virtue. It's not easy. And then that is what will bring about good experiences in the future, which is what we want. We want happiness. We want good stuff to happen to us, not bad stuff. So putting all that energy into building up positive potential, merit, and getting angry, one go, it can be destroyed. Now that's not absolute, because it said that if we dedicate the merit that we create, like we always do here, we dedicate our merit to enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. So it says that dedicating our merit to enlightenment, and best is if you do that with an understanding of emptiness. So that's not so easy, but even to, think that oh, I, the creator of the merit, and so on, all of these things don't exist inherently, independently, the way they appear. So then it said that practice of dedication of the merit will preserve it, like putting your money in the bank, provided it's a good bank. That sort of protects it from being damaged by anger. But still, it's better to try not to get angry, which, can damage or destroy our merit. And then next is, the kind of karma we create under the influence of anger is negative karma. So negative karma is the opposite to merit. Negative karma is the cause of suffering, problems, bad experiences happening to us, the things we don't want happening to us, but they will happen to us as a result of karma, actions we do motivated by anger. Okay, so if we get angry and then we act out our anger, we do something physical or verbal, we express our anger, harsh words, yelling, screaming, shouting, abuse, and so on. Or even just having angry thoughts, because often just on the mental level, we may imagine, we may fantasize doing things out of anger, or even just to have the wish to do harmful things out of anger. So in these ways, we are creating karma, negative karma, bad karma, and that is the cause of suffering. That's where our suffering and our problems, our bad experiences come from. So it is possible to purify. Karma isn't like fate. It isn't like something carved in stone. There's nothing you can do about it. Karma is fluid. It can be rectified, purified. But if we don't do that, if we don't do anything to purify it, then problems will come. Then it says it's an obstacle to cultivating positive qualities like love, compassion, and wisdom. So we have within our mind, among our mental factors, we have a lot of positive ones, virtuous ones. These are the source of our happiness, but also of our spiritual growth along the path. If we want to attain higher states of mind, become a better person, more helpful to others, and so on, we can cultivate these positive qualities. So Buddhism has a lot of methods we can use to grow our love, our compassion, and our wisdom that sees things clearly. But in our attempts to do that, anger can be an obstacle. For example, to cultivate these positive qualities, ideally we need to do some meditation. Okay, so there's meditations where we cultivate love, compassion, and so on, making our minds more familiar with those qualities. And while we're meditating, it's possible that anger can come up. Any kind of meditation you do, breathing meditation. Maybe it's happened to you before. You're trying to focus on your breathing, and then you think of some person who did something to you, or some person you don't like, and your mind just gets totally carried away. How bad that person is, and what you want to say to them next time you meet, what you want to do to them to get back at them for what they did to you. Does that ever happen? Has your mind ever sort of no? Yeah, so it's anger and that kind of thought, that way of thinking is one of the hindrances to developing concentration and being successful in our practice of meditation. So that's how it's an obstacle. Yeah, so if we want to grow these positive qualities, become a nicer person, more kind, compassionate, more intelligent, and so on. Anger can interfere with that. Another thing too, another problem with anger, if we do have a habit of getting angry and we don't do anything to learn how to deal with it, when we come to the end of our life and we're dying, it's possible that anger could come up in the mind. And dying in an angry state of mind is really bad. I mean, for various reasons. One is it's just not a nice way to go, and it won't be nice for the people around you, you know, being present as you're dying. But from the Buddhist point of view, death isn't like an end to everything, but it's more like a gateway to another life. Our mind, our consciousness will leave this body, go and take another body, start another life. And the kind of life we have, the kind of rebirth that we take in our next life depends on various factors, like the karma we create during our life. But one of the main factors is the state of mind we have at the time of death. And ideally, we want to die in a positive state of mind. We want to have some kind of good thoughts, good feelings, good experiences like love, compassion, faith, taking refuge in Buddha, and so on. So that's a good state of mind to have at the time of death. But anger is not a good state of mind. That's a really bad state of mind. So if we die in an angry state of mind, very little chance of having a fortunate rebirth in our next life. Instead, going to an unfortunate situation. So if that makes sense to you, that can be another incentive to learn to manage anger, work on anger. Okay, so these are some disadvantages. There may be others as well we could think of, but this, at least to get started looking at the disadvantages. Now, is there anything good about anger? Is there a list of pros? They do say, some teachers say that there's one good thing about anger, and that is that we can get rid of it. It's not permanent, it's not fixed, it's possible to eliminate it. But I also find that anger is very interesting, yeah. So when it does come up in the mind, if you can not get caught up in it, but study it, observe it, get familiar with it, then you can learn a lot. And I had a discussion once with Geshe Kelsang Longmo, and she said the same thing. She said she found anger really interesting to study. And there's one question that often comes up when the Dalai Lama or other lamas are meeting with people who are not necessarily Buddhist or just starting to learn about Buddhism, and that includes psychologists. The Dalai Lama often meets with scientists, psychologists, educators, politicians, and so on. And in their discussions, the question often comes up, what about anger over injustice, right? When there's injustice, which there's a lot of, and you get angry about that, isn't that like a helpful thing? Isn't it right to get angry about those things? And doesn't it kind of stir us to get off our seats and do something to try to end that injustice? So that's a good question. And it seems, from what I've heard, the Dalai Lama does agree that, yeah, that kind of anger can be useful. And there's one book called Beyond Religion by the Dalai Lama. And that book has an entire chapter on dealing with destructive emotions. And in that chapter, he says, Anger is not always destructive. For example, in some situations, strong compassion may give rise to an equally strong sense of outrage, that is, anger, about an injustice. So that kind of anger is associated with compassion. And if we see or hear about people who are harmed by others, children, women, or people who are impoverished, and so on, and there's people who are more powerful than them and doing things harmful to them, it's compassion. We have compassion for those people who are suffering, and we want to help them. We feel what's going on is wrong. We need to do something. We need to stop that. So that's really coming from compassion. And so the Dalai Lama says, again, feeling angry can, in the short term, make our minds more focused and give us an extra burst of energy and determination. In these ways, anger can, in certain situations, make us more effective in getting things done and in obtaining what we rightly seek. However, when anger extends beyond this practical function, most of the energy it brings us is not helpful at all. Since all of us have probably at one time or another been on the receiving end of other people's anger, we all have the experience of its unpleasant consequences. So I think what he's saying is, yeah, when we hear about an injustice or to observe an injustice and we feel angry about this because of compassion for those who are being harmed, then that can give us the energy to do something, to get involved in finding a solution, ending this injustice. But ideally, we want to put our anger aside and use our intelligence to think of what would be an effective solution, what would be a constructive way of dealing with this situation. Because anger, usually it makes our mind kind of crazy, chaotic, yeah, not able to think clearly. You might come up with solutions, but maybe not very effective solutions, like let's go bomb that place, or kill that person. So that's not probably a good solution. So we want to find ways of cooling down, calming down our mind, our anger, and then, thinking or working with other people to think of solutions that will be effective and constructive, and then, put our energy into those. And then try not to let anger influence our way of acting and dealing with those who are carrying out this injustice. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think a lot of people know that anyway, especially if you've already tried a number of times unsuccessfully to bring about changes due to anger. Then you think, okay, we have to do something else here. Okay, let's start looking at some solutions. And I will leave time later. You'll have a chance yourself to discuss in the afternoon, and then later when I come back in the afternoon, I'll give you time to ask questions. I just like to try to get a bit more material done. So this is another quotation from a Buddhist text called Engaging in the Deeds of a Bodhisattva, or another translation is Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, a great Indian master, 8th century, I think. And in his text, there's a whole chapter 6, full of ways of working on anger. It's wonderful. So this is one of the verses. There is no evil like hatred, and no fortitude like patience. Thus, I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. So again, we need to be careful with statements like this when he uses a word like evil, that we don't identify with our anger, because then we'll feel, I am evil. Okay, nobody's evil. Nobody's bad. We're all, I heard this lovely quote from Mother Teresa, which I like. There are no bad people. There are only good people who do bad things. I really like that. It's separating a people are basically good. We all have good nature, good qualities. We're not evil. But we sometimes have negative thoughts and we sometimes do negative things. But those aren't who we really are. Those aren't permanent parts of us. So again, hatred, anger is evil in the sense that it leads to a lot of harm, a lot of suffering, but it's just a temporary aspect of our mind. It's like a disease, like a virus that we get infected with, and it's not who we really are. So we want to de-identify with our anger and just see it as something in our mind that can come up, mess things up in our own mind, in our life, but we can deal with it. We can work on it. So patience, what he mentions here, patience is the opposite of anger. And there's different types of patience, but one type of patience is learning how to deal with difficult people and difficult situations where we could get angry. Maybe we do feel angry coming up, but learning how to manage those situations and those people without just blowing up, acting out anger, and doing something harmful and retaliating. That's often our motivation. Somebody hurts us, we feel, I have to hurt them back. So patience is a really positive quality, and there's a lot of advantages to patience. I'll just mention some of these. Maybe we can discuss them more later. But for one thing, how it affects our mind when we have patience, when there's patience in our mind is calm and peaceful. And even some happiness, some joy in having patience as opposed to anger. So it has like the opposite effect on our mind than anger does. And also the kind of vibration we give off and the way people around us will feel when we're able to be patient is opposite to anger. Yeah, so you may have observed that in other people. For example, patient mothers. Have you ever seen that? You know, a crying baby, just crying and screaming on and on and on and on. And you think, oh my God, that was my baby. I couldn't bear that. But, you know, you see the mother holding the baby and just being very loving and patient and just keep, you know, trying different things to calm down the baby, but not losing it, not losing her temper. Yeah. So when you see that kind of thing, it's so beautiful, right? You see somebody showing patience. It's very beautiful, very inspiring, very nice. So that's the kind of effect that we can have on others when we are able to be patient. And it's good for our mind to develop more wisdom, because just as anger disturbs our mind and makes it hard to focus, patience helps our mind stay calm and clear and able to focus. And so it helps us have better concentration and and then develop wisdom and other positive qualities. And then the kind of karma we create when we have patience, it's going to be good karma, virtuous karma, positive karma, which is the cause of happiness and this life and future lives, but also further down the line, the goals that we're trying to achieve of liberation and enlightenment. So those can be achieved with the practice of patience. So those are just a few of the advantages, but it's good to compare, do a comparison. Anger, what kind of effects that has versus patience, what kind of effects that has. So compare those two in your own experience and observing the experience of others. And then hopefully that will help you decide, which way you want to go, which kind of reaction you would like to have. But it's not easy just because we decide, I'm going to be patient and not angry. There's no guarantee that anger won't come up in our mind. So we'll just start. We don't have much time left, but just start to look at some of the strategies for managing anger. So the first one I put down here is to follow the middle way between two extremes. One extreme is suppressing anger, and the other is indulging and acting it out. So probably often when anger does come up in our mind, we fall into one of these two extremes. So one is suppressing it. What that means is stuffing it, pushing it down, maybe even denying that it's there, I'm not angry. So we may try to pretend to others that we're not angry, and even to ourselves. We may not be fully accepting or acknowledging that there is anger. I know that very well. I've done a lot of that. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help to suppress it because it doesn't go away. It's not a solution. It stays. Maybe it just gets pushed down to some deeper part of the mind, but it's still there. It hasn't really been dealt with. And if you continue doing that again and again, it can build up and it can affect you physically. It can lead to illness. It can lead to maybe even mental illness. And then maybe one day you can't suppress it anymore. It's built up to such a point that it explodes. You're not like a volcano and it's just pouring out all over the place. So it's not a solution. That's important to understand. It's not a solution. Then the other extreme is indulging in it and acting it out. And so that's when anger comes up in our mind and we don't do anything to try to manage it, but we just get totally caught up and stir the stew in our mind, let our mind have all these negative thoughts and fantasies and so on and so forth, and even get to the point where we decide to do something, act it out. Or maybe it's not even a decision, maybe it just explodes before you know it. You say something, you do something. And that's not helpful either, because then, you can create problems for other people, hurt other people, create bad karma, make a mess of things. So, of course, it's always possible to apologize, purify, and so on, but better, if we can avoid that kind of thing to begin with, learn how to manage it. So it's good to look at our experience and try to recognize if and when we do fall into one of these extremes, and recognize the unhelpfulness of these approaches. And there's a middle way between these, and this is what Buddhism teaches. The middle way is to accept, to acknowledge the presence of anger in your mind, so that, yeah, if there's anger, you're not denying it, you're not suppressing it, you're not pretending it's not there, but you're aware of it. You acknowledge it. So that way you avoid the first extreme of suppression, and then you work on it. You find, we'll go through a number of different tools that you can use to work on these thoughts and feelings of anger, to at least dissolve it, let go of it, or not let yourself be affected by it, put it aside. But it's also possible with more practice, more experience, more skill, you can even transform your mind into the opposite. So if you're angry at a person, for example, it's possible to work on your mind so that you end up feeling compassion, love, positive feelings, wanting to help them instead of harm them. So that's the best case scenario, is actually transforming your mind into the opposite to anger and hatred. So that's a healthy way of working with anger, a middle way. It takes time, of course, to learn how to do this, time and practice, something we could work easily our whole life, work on this. But it's much more satisfying for yourself, also for others. You're less likely to cause suffering for others. And like I say, it's really interesting. You learn a lot from doing this. So I'll stop there. We'll continue in the afternoon with other strategies, other antidotes. But that's the general idea. That's the general idea in Buddhism of how to manage anger, is to watch the mind, observe the mind, be able to notice, recognize anger when it's there, and be accepting of it, be honest that it is there. Don't pretend it's not there. Don't suppress it or hide it. And then when you have an opportunity, you may not immediately be able to do that if it's happening in the middle of work, but when you have the chance to sit down with your mind and apply antidotes, apply strategies, then do that. Okay, so we'll stop there for this morning. And yeah, I'll take care of questions later, but some of them might be resolved anyway during the afternoon discussion. And so we'll finish our session by dedicating the merit, just in case we get angry between now and the next session, to protect it. We'll dedicate the merit to enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings.
Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May thy precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase for